Idaho. And the key evidence in that case, as outlined by Shannon Gray, who's representing the families, is the DNA. The DNA of the defendant found on a little snap button on the knife sheath that was found beneath the bodies of 2 of the victims. Like, this is unbelievable evidence. It puts the defendant there at the scene of the crime with the victims at the time of the killing. I mean, to me, how do you get around it? Well, we may have an indication on what the defense may be attempting to do. And don't forget, this DNA match was a 5.37 octillion times. I mean, it's like ridiculously how precise it is. It cannot be anyone else. It cannot reasonably be anyone else. It's his DNA on that knife sheath. So the defense filed some papers, and within those papers, one of the things they're saying is that what the state's argument asked this court and the accused killer to assume is that the DNA on the sheath was placed there by the accused killer and not someone else during an investigation that spans hundreds of members of law enforcement and apparently at least one lab the state refuses to name. So how does the state respond to that? Well, they respond in part. This is a great conclusion. If the defendant wishes to explore the theory that his DNA was planted on the K-bar knife sheath, he is free to do so, but the family tree created by the FBI has no relevance to that theory. So you've got, on the one hand, and it's all within this argument about the process of getting the DNA, but what the defense is arguing here is that potentially the DNA is planted there or somehow is contaminated, and God, I don't get it. I don't get how that would work, how that would even work. It worked in the O.J. Simpson case. For O.J. Simpson, the jury thought it was a reasonable explanation that the DNA on the gloves, et cetera, was planted there by Furman, right? Let's bring back in our think tank, Marcia Mignone, Bernard Fialona, Randy Kessler. Marcia, in the O.J. Simpson case, like, I understand, I could follow the bouncing ball, right? O.J. Simpson's a suspect. We've got some of his DNA. We've got some of his blood. We'll pour it onto the glove. Voila, we got him, right? So there he's like framed for murder because he was a suspect. How would that work in this case? They had no idea who this guy was.
Well, according to the defense, they could have gotten the DNA from when they arrested this individual. They could have gotten the DNA from the scene and spread it on the knife. So it's a tough argument. It's a tough sell. But it worked in the O.J. case. And Furman really had a hard time.
They didn't arrest him until they already did the DNA.
Well, did they do any searches? Remember, this is information that we don't know. We don't know, Vinny, if they went and searched his property, if they had taken samples from him. Because remember, that was the argument in the O.J. case, is that they took vials of blood from O.J. and never returned some of those vials. So if that's the situation here, where they were able to draw blood from this individual, then the defense may have an argument if they can prove that.
But that's how they caught him. They caught him because of the DNA. That's when they arrested him. And they had to do the familial DNA first, Randy. First, they had to go through the garbage in Pennsylvania. Like, they didn't have his DNA to plant onto there. They tested the DNA. They got a profile of the DNA on the sheath. And then my understanding is, then they matched it to, I guess, his father's DNA that was in the garbage somewhere. And then when they finally got him into custody, they took a swab. So, I mean, is anyone going to think that they want to frame this grad student who's an absolute nobody loser?
So, you know, they really have to pull, it's like who framed Roger Rabbit? They're going to have to pull a rabbit out of a hat. This is all they have. You know, they're going to go back to the old faithful, which worked a lot better 20 years ago. This is voodoo science. This is not real science. DNA, you know, we're trusting these scientists. That's about all they have, right? Because they've got them. And I think you're right, Vinny. You know, we've come so far that people now accept there's DNA on there. Why would law enforcement lie? What other reason would they have to pin it on this guy, you know, did someone say, let's go get that guy, let's get some DNA, let's bring it in? And if they have some of those theories, you got to link it up. You can't just say, well, we don't trust the state. There's some suspicion about the state and law enforcement, but in this case, I don't think they're going to get away with saying that's why he didn't do it, because the state just picked my guy and decided to pin it on him because they wanted closure. You know, you got to find that there was a bone to pick with him, that somebody was angry at him, somebody else brought that DNA. I don't see any of that happening. You know, it's a long road between here and there, but when you got nothing, you fight with anything you can fight with.
To me, Bernarda, like even like floating that idea basically tells me you're cornered. You're cornered with this DNA. You're trying to figure out a way around it. Like the only interaction he had with law enforcement, he was stopped twice in Indiana. And Indiana's already come out and said we had no conversations with the FBI. We had no idea who this guy was. He was just somebody who got pulled over twice in our state by 2 different law enforcement agencies. There he is. So it's not like they're like trying to sneak a piece of his, you know, a skin cell or something there.
So, Vinny, I don't think it's a strong argument, but hear me out, though. You have to think a defense attorney can spin this to the jury, because remember, you just need one juror to side with you in order to get a hung jury. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get an acquittal the second time around. I think if the defense argued, like, look, whoever killed these students was so meticulous to the point where they didn't leave anything else on the scene. In fact, to the point where the cell phone was turned off. In fact, that they planned this. Why would that person leave a piece of their DNA or anything having to do with themselves? Especially when you think of, remember when Brian Kohlberger, when he was arrested or when he was seen, they said that he had on gloves, that there was like a lot of clothing covering, like that's how meticulous he was. But when you think about it, I think for a second, maybe a jury will entertain it, but of course they're not going to believe it. Is it an argument? Yes. Is it a strong argument? Absolutely not, because law enforcement definitely did their investigation correctly, and they were very meticulous in the sense of, look, this DNA is not the only thing that they have. Remember, they have the cell phone records. They can put his car in the vicinity prior to these homicides taking place. In fact, they can argue that he was even circling the area. He was looking out for these students, like he planned all of this. So it's not going to go far at all.
And you know what else, Marsha, they have? They have the suspected killer returning to the scene of the crime the following morning. Is he kind of like taking a peek on the lawn and stuff, saying, oh boy, did I drop it over here? Did I drop it over there? I mean.
No, Vinny, it's AI. It's the AI. They drew his DNA and they used AI to recreate it, and they took it to the scene.
Someday that's going to be a problem in every case. You know that, right? I mean,
it's coming.
5 years down the road, every case there's going to be some sort of AI defense. Everyone's going to have an alibi. They're going to have a video of them somewhere else in the world at that time. Yeah. I think I'll have to stop doing the show when that happens, because it's going to be too many not guilties with all the AI. Anyway, all right. Wow. So we'll keep an eye on this and see if there's anything more to it.